what to do or what you can do is consulting with an immigration attorney. Now, when you come consult with an immigration attorney, there is information that we are going to need from either you or your loved ones. And so it's very important when you schedule a consultation that you yourself, or if the case is about a loved one, have information or are prepared with the documents or information that we're going to need. Oftentimes, there have been situations where we've consulted with someone and they don't know the information about the loved one, such as an entry, if they've ever applied for an immigration benefit, or, if they were detained at the border, what happened there. And that makes it more difficult for us to be able to assess the case and determine what can be done. So I'm going to go over some documents that you should bring with you when you come to an immigration consultation with an attorney. So one, documents to bring. One of the things would be if there is an issue, for example, there is perhaps a typo, an error in a birth certificate, and that birth certificate is going to be used to prove a relationship. We do want to see it. We want to review that document, especially if you know that there's, an issue with that birth certificate. You want to bring immigration documents, and this is really important. So if you or the loved one who's trying to get information about an immigration benefit, we need to know, has that person applied for an immigration benefit before? And if they have, we often want to see that, those applications. If the person entered lawfully, we want to see that documentation as well. If, for example, you're going into a consultation because the government has issued a notice of intent to deny your case, well, we want to review that letter. If you come in and you don't have that letter with you, it makes it a lot harder for us to know, what exactly is the government alleging or saying about your case, and how is it that we can help you in, getting a positive decision on your case. If you or your loved one is in an immigration proceeding, in immigration court, or the person is detained, we also need to see those documents. Oftentimes, again, we've had consultations where someone says, my loved one's been my loved one is detained. They had an immigration process. Great. What's the immigration process? What did they file? And the family member has no idea. So these are important things because this can sometimes save us time in trying to figure out or having to order, what would be called FOIAs or Freedom of Information Act documents to collect and see, what was filed in the past. So if you've ever filed anything with immigration, keep those documents or at least scan them and keep an electronic file, because those are documents that we will need to review if you're seeking an immigration benefit in the future. Other things that we would want to see: if a relative or a loved one has filed a petition for you on your behalf, we also want to take a look at that documentation. So very important when you're coming to an immigration consultation. If you have the documents, please bring them with you. Now, there are situations where someone has lost the documentation, and that's why they're consulting, because they want to see, how can I get a copy of that? And that's understandable. But if you do have documents, please don't forget them. Please bring them with you. Now, other documents that we do want to see: legal, criminal history. If you are the loved one who's seeking the benefit, or even sometimes the person filing a petition, known as the petitioner, may have had some criminal history, we need to know that information. And what happens sometimes is someone will say, oh, I was arrested. It happened 20 years ago, but it all got cleared away. That's fantastic, but we need to know how it got cleared away. And the reason why is criminal and immigration is not often the same in terms of convictions. Criminal cases, sometimes you can be placed in what's called a pretrial diversion program or deferred adjudication. If you complete the requirements, then your case is dismissed. And for criminal purposes, that's fantastic. Immigration purposes, however, that can still be considered a conviction. And so this is why it's important for us to review that documentation, take a look at it, because sometimes well, one, if you have criminal history, we need to know about it. And two, we need to see and determine if that's going to affect your case. So very important, again, when you come to an immigration consultation, please try to have your criminal history with you. If you don't know it, or you don't have the documents with you, at least let us have, please come prepared with certain basic information. If you have, for example, your case number, was it a felony or a misdemeanor? Also, where did this happen? Who arrested you? Who was the arresting agency? Did you have to go to court? And if you went to court, what court was it? Out of which county? And sometimes that can help us in trying to find the records, or not all the full records, but at least find some general information about the criminal history, because that is something that's very important when trying to seek an immigration benefit. Now, here is a very important tip. If you don't know whether you should bring that document or not, just bring it. We'll go ahead and tell you during the consultation. That's okay. We don't need to see that document. And one of the things is because, again, we look at immigration and criminal documents. This is our career. It's very easy for us to be able to decipher which, document we'll need, which one we don't need, and we'll be able to better assess your case and give you a better indication of whether something can be done or not in your situation. Now, another thing that you should know when consulting with an immigration attorney is, what questions should I ask? And before I get started, if you're interested in consulting with our firm, just comment below consultation and we'll send you information on how to schedule a consultation with us. But when you consult with an attorney, we are here to answer your questions. No question is silly or dumb. We appreciate people who ask us questions because we want to make sure that you are clear when you walk out of the consultation, that you understand what we discussed, that you understand whether or not there is a potential solution or a benefit for you or your loved one. So we welcome questions because we do want you to know the steps, what's the process, and have it clear, and you have a clearer understanding of what can be done. So I'm going to list some examples of questions that we've had consultations ask us and that we think are also important. So one is, do I have options to fix my status inside the United States? And this is very important. We do have situations where, unfortunately, someone cannot fix their status within the United States. They have to travel abroad. But, during the consultation, we ask questions because we want to see if there's a route or a way for someone to be able to obtain status here in the United States without having to depart. And sometimes it does happen if someone's been a victim of a particular crime. There is what's called a U visa. Other situations would be if the spouse or a adult child has been abusive towards the person seeking a benefit. In that situation, they could potentially qualify for what's called VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, and that is a status that can lead you to residency. If there was a minor who was abandoned or neglected by a parent, then there is a special juvenile visa for certain minors that are in the United States, and they don't have to depart. So this is why it's important to ask questions and for you to give us the answers, because this is how we are able to assess the case and determine, okay, yes, this is what we can potentially do. Or unfortunately, at this time, the way that the law is written, you do have a way of obtaining residency, but you're going to have to travel abroad, and these are the steps for that. Now, another question that I often get, which is kind of the same as do I have any options or can I fix here in the U.S., is, do I need to leave the country? And depending on the situation, as I mentioned, there are situations where the person is going to have to depart the United States. There are cases where we are able to file, for example, a unlawful presence waiver here in the United States. thereby eliminating the waiting time outside the United States for the client. And there are other situations where the person may have what's called a permanent bar, and the person literally will have to leave the United States and wait outside 10 years before they can file a permission to enter the United States lawfully. So every situation is different. And this is why it's very important. And I know that is one of the biggest questions that I get during the consultations is, do I need to leave? So again, case by case basis. Another question that we often get is, how long could my case take? And that is a really great question. And what sometimes happens is we can say, okay, your case will take approximately, let's say, 4 to 6 months. And in that time, there are backlogs within the government agencies, or if it's a court case, maybe a judge retires or they've changed the case to another judge. And now we find ourselves not resolving the case within that time frame, but now we're seeing that the case, in immigration court has been rescheduled to 2 years out, or there's now a backlog. For example, U visas, which when I first started, we used to be able to get these responses, these approvals within a year. 2017, 2016, we were looking at potentially a 4-year wait. And now cases filed 2016, 2017 are finally getting approvals now. And U visas filed today, we're looking at potentially 10 years or longer. So things can change within the immigration system, unfortunately, where we do see backlogs. During COVID, they were still working, but we did see bigger backlogs for certain cases. So if you filed an unlawful presence waiver, an I-601A, those used to, again, get approved in approximately 6 to 8 months. Now we're looking at 2.5 to 3.5 years. So when you consult, we're here to tell you the time frame, and we can never guarantee you the time frame because, again, it's not just us filing and, representing the client, let's say in immigration court. There are situations out of our control and that deal more with the government agencies that can cause delays. So that is a really good question to ask. We always tell the client or the person during the consultation, this is what we're looking at right now, but it could change. Sometimes it could be quicker. Sometimes it could be a lot longer. So some more questions. What are the risks in my case? That is a very important question to ask when you're in a consultation. And especially right now, where I know a lot of people are fearful of filing for an immigration benefit. We've had people who've said they are terrified of potentially getting detained. And we understand that is a real situation. So one of the things that you do want to ask is, what are my risks? What are my risks if I have to travel outside the United States? One, an attorney can never guarantee a case. We can analyze, we can assess, and we can tell you, well, generally in these situations, we see approvals, but we can never guarantee anything. The only thing we can do is prepare the person for the case and say, we believe that, based on these other situations or cases, we think that this may be an approvable case. But we always, once we consult with the client, we want to explain those risks. If the person has criminal history, if the person has, for example, a removal order, if the person has certain criminal or immigration violations, all of that can increase the risk for that person. So if you are in that situation, it is very important when consulting with an immigration attorney, ask us that question. We do want to tell you what those risks are. One thing we cannot do is tell you what to do. And this is something that I'm faced with from time to time, where a client, I explain the situation and I say, well, this is this option or this option. And they'll ask, well, what should I do? What do you think I should do? I cannot tell the client what to do. That's going to be the personal choice of the person. The only thing I can do is tell you the risks, but you will have to make that decision. Other questions. So what happens if my case gets denied? And that's a really good question to ask. And that's going to also, the answer is going to depend on the type of case it is. In certain situations, we can file an appeal. In other situations, the government might send a letter and say, well, now that you've overstayed, you need to depart the United States. Or certain situations where if there's a denial, we cannot appeal the decision. And then if the case is abroad for someone who's living abroad and seeking either consular processing or seeking a non-immigrant visa, for example, a tourist visa, and it gets denied, well, then we go through we explain, well, what happens if it gets denied? Can you try again? When should you try again? So again, important questions to keep in mind when consulting with an immigration attorney. Another question that we often get as well is, can I get a work permit, or will I have a work permit while my case is pending? And as much as I would love everybody to get a work permit while their case is pending, the truth is that not everybody will qualify for a work permit while their case is pending. So if someone has to go outside the United States and get their residency through what's called consular processing, and that means basically that you're going to apply for your green card, but you're going to have to go to an interview at a U.S. consulate or a U.S. embassy. Generally, you're not going to qualify for a work permit. And this is where it's frustrating, because in certain situations where the person is applying for residency in the United States, that person generally qualifies for a work permit. And so we've had situations where sometimes someone says, well, my friend has a work permit. Why can I not get a work permit? And the situation is, well, your situation is different. You're going to have to consular process. So that is a question that we often get during a consultation. And, just depending on the circumstance of each case, that'll determine if the person will qualify for that work permit. Other things to avoid common mistakes to avoid while consulting. So one is showing up unprepared. This is where it's important to know the information of the person who's seeking the benefit. Like I said, I've had people consult where, they want to know if their loved one can get an immigration benefit, but they don't know any of their immigration history. They don't know any of their criminal history. And so that's not very helpful, because if we don't have that information, it makes it harder for us to be able to, again, assess the case and determine if that person's going to be eligible. So you want to be as prepared as possible with that information. Another common mistake that you should avoid is not telling us the full truth. If you do not tell us the full truth, and based on the information, we say, okay, it sounds like you do qualify for an immigration benefit. And down the road, immigration says, hey, this person actually has a removal order, or this person has a permanent bar. That's going to be very frustrating for you and for us. One, because we were not told the truth and we proceeded with a case thinking that you were eligible. And two, obviously you'll be frustrated in worst case scenario. If you lied and went abroad and you have a permanent bar, you're stuck there for 10 years. So it is very important for you to tell us the truth. That's the only way that we can help you, is by knowing everything. If you fail to disclose something, immigration, obviously their job is to review the case, get your fingerprint biometrics data, and that information will come up. Unfortunately, I have seen it sometimes in interviews, and sometimes the client is surprised. But again, it's the government. They have the information. So we need that information to be able to guide you and assess your case and determine whether you actually qualify for a benefit. And if there is some sort of immigration violation or criminal violation, do you qualify for a waiver, and in order for you to proceed with that immigration benefit? Another thing that we sometimes see, and thankfully not too often, but hiding your entries and exits. Again, like I've said, immigration agencies, they will do their due diligence. They will review, they will schedule fingerprint appointments when you apply for certain immigration benefits, and they're going to review that. And so if you are trying to hide these entries and exits and they find that, obviously it's not going to go well for the case. So do not hide your entries and exits to us. Please tell us your full entries and exits so we can assess the case correctly. Another common mistake that I do see is not disclosing arrests. And I understand that sometimes because, maybe the criminal attorney has said your case is dismissed, it has been expunged, wiped clean. People think that, I don't have to disclose that. No, immigration is different from criminal court, and we still need to know that. So even if your case is expunged, we still need to disclose that to immigration. And they're going to, like I said, when you apply for certain immigration benefits, you're going to have to go to a fingerprint appointment. They're going to collect your data, and they're going to see that you have been arrested. So we need that information. There is, I've been in situations where I've gone to an interview, client hasn't disclosed an arrest, and we show up to the interview and the officer is like, tell us about this arrest. So they are going to find out about that information. And if your case was expunged, please consult with an immigration attorney, because sometimes that makes it even harder, because now we cannot collect or gather that evidence, your criminal records. All that's going to show up is that nothing happened. But depending on the criminal case, that can be something that can affect you, where we have to prove that, let's say possession of marijuana, we have to prove that it was less than 30 grams or less in order for you to qualify for a waiver. But now we can't get the police report. Now we can't get those criminal documents. So very important. If you've ever been arrested, if you've ever gone to jail, if you've ever gotten a citation for possession of paraphernalia, possession of marijuana, or you've gotten a citation for alcohol, example, even including minor in possession of alcohol, please disclose that information to us. Please let us know. We need all of those details. And one of the things with immigration is, we've dealt with clients who've had, immigration violations, criminal violations. We are not here to judge you. If you are in the middle of a consultation and, let's say your spouse is with you and you don't want them to know that you had gotten arrested for theft maybe 10 years back, do us a favor, tell them to step outside of the room and tell us that information, or consult with us, but, and maybe have the spouse not join in the consultation, but just, let them know before telling us, or go home and tell them. But, tell us this information. We need to know this information. And I know that certain situations can be embarrassing for someone. Again, us as attorneys, we have heard it all. We are not here to judge you for your past. We just need to know it so we can help you. Now, another thing that mistake that you should avoid is relying on advice from simply social media or friends. One thing that we hear often is, well, my friend got, her green card very quickly, or, well, my friend said it only took a month for him to get his green card, or my cousin didn't have to leave the United States and he has his green card. I don't know their situations. I want to see their paperwork if there was some sort of miracle there, but every case is different. And, sometimes what happens is maybe your relative or your friend, one, maybe it's not even their green card that they have. It might be a work permit. Two, they might have potentially gotten residency or legal status because they were victims of a crime, and maybe they don't want to tell everybody, that they were victims of some sort of horrendous crime. You just don't know. And so relying simply on advice from friends or from social media is not the way to go about it. This is why consulting with an immigration attorney is important, because here we're having a confidential conversation with you. What you tell us is confidential. We're not going to go out and tell other people, and we need to know your information again in order to assess your case and to determine how we can help you. So one of the other things that we need to know when we're consulting with you is your story. And so when you come to a consultation, you're going to, for example, with my office, you'll first you'll call us and we'll schedule that consultation, and you'll talk to one of my staff members. And, my staff members there to gather general information and, determine what the case is about. Okay, you want to file for your spouse or your loved one is detained. And then during the consultation is directly with me, and I go over the information. I am already, I've looked at the information and I'm aware of, okay, this is kind of the situation. This is what I need to ask, or more information that I need to gather from this person in order to see if, they qualify for that residency. But we do need to know your history, and that includes, how did you enter the United States? Did you enter legally with a visa, or did you enter unlawfully? How many times have you entered the United States? And this is important, especially for younger people that I've consulted with who are maybe in their teens, but they entered when they were children. Have these tough conversations with your parents, because if you want to be able to get your, immigration benefit, we need to know this information. And, talk to your parents. How did how did I come in? When did I come in? Did we ever leave when I was a kid and come back? When we tried to enter the U.S., were we detained at the border? Mom and Dad, do you remember if we were fingerprinted? Again, very important questions to ask parents. And I know, again, it can be a little bit stressful, or sometimes parents are like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. But it's your case, it's your life. You need to ask these questions and get the answers to that. And like I said, we need your immigration history and also your criminal history. So again, very important information that all attorneys need during a consultation. So how to make the most of your consultation. So one, be on time, please. We ask that you be on time because there is a lot of information that, we do have to collect about you or your loved one. If you brought documents, we need the time to be able to review that. So another thing is take notes. I know sometimes when talking to someone about the immigration process, it can be overwhelming. And I can sometimes just see it in their faces that they're overwhelmed and not quite understanding. And so oftentimes I like to kind of lay it out in writing for them, for the consults, so they can kind of see what it is that, what the process is, what that process is going to look like. So you are free to take notes. Please handwrite your notes. If you want to borrow a legal pad to take your notes, please feel free to do that. If you want to type out your questions and bring them to the consultation, we welcome that. We definitely want you to be prepared so we can be prepared for your consultation. And don't be afraid to ask questions. This is why you're consulting with us. You're consulting with us so we can explain things to you. And if something doesn't make sense to you, it's kind of going over your head, because I know sometimes legal jargon can be daunting. Ask us, can you explain it to me in another way? Or, I'm more of a visual learner, so can you kind of help me visualize it? We, again, as attorneys, are here to answer your questions, and we want you to have a really good understanding of your process when you walk out that door. We want to be able for you to go to your spouse and say, I spoke to the attorney. This is the process that they said that I have to do, and be able to, have that general understanding. Now, and again, I know that, for example, in certain cases, it's certain cases can take sometimes 5.5 years. It's all step by step. And so as long as you can explain and you walk out of that consultation saying, I know that I have to go through 3 or 4 steps and understand the basics, I think that that's a really good consultation. So ask questions. No question is too silly. Do not be embarrassed. We are not here to judge. We are here to answer your questions and see if there is a way that we can help you. So that's it for our time today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And if you are interested in consulting with us, just comment consultation so we can send you the information on how to consult with our firm. And again, the best thing that you can do is stay informed about your case, or stay informed or get information of how you can obtain an immigration benefit. Don't be afraid to ask those questions, and don't be afraid to come in with a pen and paper and take notes. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a great day.